Hi, this is meant to be an introduction to the motivation behind my design for a file input system for my Mancala system. I had two choices of ways to do the file. One is to make one file and then have all the players in that one file with their statistics of games played, wins, losses, ties, or have an individual file for each player. The individual for each player I showed how to do in my other video on File.io. And that's a lot simpler, but unfortunately, if I have a game where I have several players playing a game and they want to compete against each other, then having it all in one location where I can print out all the statistics at once, then it would be nice. And so what I decided to do was create one file. And the initial time I did it was I noticed it was somewhat hard to actually find, not duplicate a name. So what I have done here is I have two files. One is the original file and the second one is a backup file. And I go through and read the initial file when I'm just starting up. And I read every name in the original file and look for the two players to see if there are any names that match for the two names that were typed in for the two players who are playing Mancala. If one of them matches, then I go ahead and fill up their statistics into the game statistics, the games played, wins, losses, ties, and then go back and check the next entry and go through until I find either both names or doesn't make any difference. If I find one name, then I will go ahead and load the statistics for that player into the gameplay statistics. If I do not find, if a name does not match one of the two players, then I go ahead and write it to a backup file. So it's the same name, mancala.bak for backup. And then at that time, then I will have all the players that have played before in one location. And then I would have a way of copying those over. And then after this game is done, take the two players' information and add it to the end of the file the new regular file I just created based on the backup file. Hope that makes sense. And just so you'll know what the files look like after I go through, then this is the backup file. And then this is the file that the backup file was read from. And if you notice, then Fred and Wilma, which are the two players for this particular game, if you notice, their statistics are right in here, which are these two statistics. And then the backup file has all the names except for those two. Now, if I had chosen Bob and George, then it would have taken out those two names and everything else would have been left. Or it could have been Bob and, for lack of a better term, Sally. So if Bob and Sally are playing, then I'd go through and the only one that would be missing from the backup file would be Bob. But at the end of the game, then I would write both Bob and Sally into the main text file. And if I go in and show you again the code and see if I can explain a little bit better what it does, but use this in conjunction with the other code that I have or the other video. So then I have, let's see, going down a little bit, I should have had this done beforehand. So here's initialize player. Then again, I have a text file that I have all the names in one location. And then I go through and ask, what are the two players' names? And I go ahead and fill it up. And this is a little bit different than the next video we'll have, because I have a struct that I hold all the games, wins, losses, and ties in. Then I go through and I set up the file. And if the file exists, so in other words, I can read from it, then I go ahead and start reading one line at a time. So I'm storing all this information, and it has to be space or tab separated. And so I'm going ahead and just reading in that information. Then if one of the names matches one of the players, I go ahead and fill up the games played, the wins, the losses, and the ties, so that that player has their original statistics, so they are never lost. Again, I try to keep everything stored in one file, and then to make it easier to read and write, and have a backup file, which then prints out the information to save it. So then the other thing I try to do is always separate these by at least a space, because I do not want them run together, or else it'll just be considered one long either name with a number after it, or else a group of numbers. The spaces have to be put in, and they are very important. So again, the motivation is to have one file that stores the information for all the players, so I don't have a whole bunch of files hanging around. And once I have this, then I can go ahead and ask the players for their names. And if they match one of the names in the file, then that will be brought up. And I would go ahead and load the names in here. And so that the player starts where they left off the last time they played, which is what we want. Then the logic, which is explained in the next video, is that on exiting the game, then the information in the backup file are copied over to the .txt file, and these two names with their scores will be added at the end, so they too can have information stored from one game to the next. I hope this is helpful, and if you need more information, please ask, and I will go ahead and record this. So thank you.